Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're kicking off something really exciting, a 56-day journey straight through the first 10 chapters of Matthew. Now, I want you to forget the dusty, boring rule books you might associate with religion. Seriously, toss them out. We're going to be looking at a guide designed to show just how radically relevant this ancient rebel is to your everyday life right now.
So let's just dive right into this highly disruptive idea. We kind of need to completely shatter that safe, stained glass image of Jesus we're all so used to. You see, Matthew doesn't introduce him as some untouchable celebrity born into privilege. Not at all. He's introduced as a refugee, someone fleeing a violent government before he could even walk. Think about that. He actually understands exactly what it feels like to be displaced, overlooked, and to just not fit in. Here is how we're going to map out this 8-week study plan, tracking his journey from an unexpected outsider to a radical teacher. We're hitting 5 key areas: checking the ancient receipts, flipping the cultural script, behind the selfie camera, touching the untouchables, and finally, your 56-day mission. First up, checking the ancient receipts. He has the receipts, not just a vibe. We are starting our journey by looking at the very first chapters of Matthew, where we see Jesus arriving with all the historical proof necessary to back up his mission. And this brilliantly illustrates the chronological progression of our 56-day plan. We're taking this step by step through those first 10 chapters, from weeks 1 and 2 covering his arrival and launch, straight into his teachings in weeks 3 and 4. Then we look at private life and wisdom for weeks 5 and 6, and wrap it all up with his power and mission in weeks 7 and 8. Now, let's look at where it all started. Jesus intentionally chose to grow up in Nazareth. And guys, Nazareth was a tiny town that was basically the punchline of Jewish geography. It was the absolute middle of nowhere. So if you've ever felt like you come from a tough neighborhood, or maybe you go to a school that nobody's really impressed by, well, you are in incredibly good company. Jesus picked obscurity on purpose because his kingdom is built from the bottom up. Right as his ministry is launching, John the Baptist comes in and demands a fruit check. He essentially told the religious experts of the day that just wearing the right labels, that's not going to cut it. Genuine faith is not just about showing up to youth group on Sunday. It's a massive, absolute change of direction. It means your group chat, your attitude at home, your choices when literally nobody is watching, all of that has to actually match what you claim to believe. You've got to show that fruit on Monday morning too. Moving on to part 2, flipping the cultural script. The Sermon on the Mount upgrade. We're in week 3 now, and this is where Jesus delivers his famous sermon and completely flips what the culture says is important. You know, the Sermon on the Mount totally redefines the idea of meekness. Let's be honest, in a modern high school hallway, being called meek sounds a lot like being called a pushover, right? But the original Greek word used here, pros, actually describes a trained warhorse. It is immense strength. It is pure power, but perfectly under the writer's control. It's not weakness at all. It's knowing you could absolutely fight back, but actively choosing restraint instead. That is a game changer. So think about it like this. The world's way is completely obsessed with clout, right? It's all about performing your comeback story, seeking revenge, and canceling your enemies. But Jesus introduces the ultimate upgrade. The kingdom's way is about mourning so you can grow. It's about actively breaking those cycles of drama instead of escalating them. And get this, radically praying for the exact people who persecute you and make your life harder. No way around it, that is tough. And that brings us to this hard-hitting quote. If following Jesus has literally never cost you anything, it might be worth asking which version of Jesus you're actually following. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. If your faith is just, comfortable all the time, it might not be the real deal. The blessed life involves real-world costs. Standing up for the right thing might cost you a spot at the popular table. It might cost you a friendship or your reputation. But Jesus says that's exactly when you are blessed. Now, I want to ask you directly, what shortcut are you currently tempted by? And what would you have to bow to in order to actually take it? Remember, when Jesus was out in the wilderness, Satan offered him a massive shortcut, literally all the power in the world without the pain of the cross. But every shortcut has a hidden price tag. Whether it's cheating to get a grade or just compromising your core values so you can fit in, modern shortcuts usually require you to bow to something other than God. And it will always cost you your integrity. Always. Okay, into section 3, behind the selfie camera, the audience of one. As we enter weeks 5 and 6, we transition into the private life of the king's people, moving away from performing for the timeline. We totally live in the age of the highlight reel, don't we? It seems like every single good deed gets its own story post. But Jesus flips this completely. He challenges us to make God our audience of one. The reality is, if you do something generous just for the timeline, just to get likes, well, you've already cashed out your reward. That's it. It's the secret things, the generosity that happens when the selfie camera is turned off, that actually echoes into eternity. And this naturally leads to what we call the treasure test. You can easily find your heart's true treasure by just looking at what you protect the most and what you fear losing. It's about asking for daily bread, not demanding a massive stockpile of grace. And when it comes down to it, worry is actually a theological statement. Your worry is essentially you saying with your actions that you just don't trust that God is big enough to handle your tomorrow. You know, it is so incredibly easy to use your camera and your judgment to zoom right in on the speck in everyone else's eye. We are basically experts at diagnosing other people's drama, right? Diagnosing everyone else's issues while remaining totally blind to the massive log-sized mess in our own lives. Jesus is challenging us here to put the camera down and deal with our own hidden stuff first. Moving on to section 4, touching the untouchables, crossing the social distance. Okay, let's dive into week 7, where Jesus proves his authority not just by what he says, but by exactly who he chooses to interact with.
To put this into perspective, in the ancient world, a man with leprosy was literally untouchable. I mean, socially and physically isolated. Yet Jesus didn't just heal him from some safe, comfortable distance. He reached out and physically touched him. He even went out of his way to have dinner with Matthew, who was considered a corrupt tax collector, the ultimate wrong crowd. Jesus completely ignored the risk to his own reputation because he wanted to reach the excluded. And this brilliantly illustrates how Jesus operates. When a paralyzed man was literally lowered through a roof, everyone expected a physical healing for his legs. That was the presenting need. But Jesus went straight to the deeper need first, offering forgiveness for the man's soul. It's fascinating. He always goes deeper than what we show up asking for, addressing that spiritual root way before he ever fixes the physical circumstances. Finally, we reach section 5, your 56-day mission, sent out to the world. We've made it to week 8, where Jesus sends his followers out to their own school hallways and group chats to actually do the work. I absolutely love this quote. Your calling is not based on your competence. It's based on his commission. Let me emphasize this incredibly empowering truth. Jesus handed total authority to uneducated fishermen, a despised tax collector, and political outsiders way before they had any kind of resume or Bible college degrees. He didn't wait around for them to be perfectly qualified. He qualifies you as he sends you. Now, obviously, going out into the world can be scary. But if you're ever feeling overlooked or just small, remember the sparrow math. Sparrows were literally the cheapest thing in the ancient market, yet God notices every single one of them. And Jesus tells us, you are worth more than sparrows, so much more. God's knowledge of you is specific, it is intimate, and it's deeply reassuring. He counts the exact hairs on your head. That is how seen you are. But as you go out there, you have to find an exact balance. You've got to be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves. What does that mean? It means being street smart, being able to read complex situations and navigate them so you don't get eaten alive, but at the exact same time, remaining uncorrupted, keeping your integrity perfectly intact with zero compromise so you don't accidentally become a wolf yourself. Which brings us to the profound closing thought of this explainer. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. This is the central paradox of following Jesus. See, the tighter you hold on to your own plans, your reputation, your social survival, the more you actually lose what you were made for. By finally letting go of your own agenda to embrace his, you find something so much deeper. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to wrap up our day 56. What are you holding on to so tightly right now that it's keeping you from fully following Jesus? Seriously, what part of your image or your comfort zone are you gripping onto? What would losing it actually look like for you this week? I challenge you to step out of that comfort zone, let it go, and see what incredible things you discover on this 56-day mission.